Hi, everybody. Welcome back to our second installment of podcast with Grant Lichtman, the author of #EdJourney. We're really excited to continue the conversation and get into a deeper dive. We got a lot of great buzz from the very first podcast, so we're looking to do a deeper dive into the challenges around innovation. Last time we did this, we had some questions, and we're going to get to them now. Justin, do you want to start us off with the questions?
Great. Thanks, Garth. And Grant, thanks for joining us again. So we had a question from Helen Parisi Arasso, who asked, given your travels and the schools you visited, Grant, what would you identify as the greatest challenge or obstacles for schools?
Well, it's a great question from Helen, and it does lead right into our discussion for today, which is going to be around the use of time at schools. But I want to make an important point right at the outset, and that is that time is a resource, and any time that we want to solve a problem, there's a wonderfully simple thing called a logic model, which says you start with the change that you want to see, you work backwards through the impacts and the activities that you can create to enable that change, and then really you work backward to how you're applying your resources. So I just want everybody to understand right at the outset, time is a resource, and it is our most precious resource. It seems to always we don't have enough of it ever at schools, but we have to recognize that we can't just lead directly to a discussion of how should we use time better without knowing what we're trying to achieve by that better use of time. It's super important because almost every school I go to, every school I visit, they're very eager to tackle the issue of how time is being used at the school. But if they haven't had that discussion yet about what they're trying to achieve with that better use of time, they're really putting the cart before the horse.
Okay, so let's jump into that concept of time. And one of the things which you articulate really well in your book is that indeed time is a resource, and that traditional timetables are very poor reflections of the type of learning that we need to see in our schools. And it begins with this concept of the Carnegie model of timetable. And that concept is that a credit is based on the amount of time that you are in class. So in Ontario, in the Ontario system, you will get a math credit if you do a certain level of work for 110 hours. That's the specific time allotted to it. And so we work backwards from that and create our timetables to ensure that our students are sitting in class for 110 hours. So that's the origin of our traditional timetables. Grant, why is it so hard to break that concept?
Well, I think, yeah, I mean, it's very hard to break it because that's a framing element. It's like asking a fish, how would you live if you weren't in water? It's been such a fundamental part of the experience we've all had growing up in. And certainly there are educators who say, look, for example, you can have an argument about whether a student learns a foreign language better if they get a certain amount of foreign language every day rather than skipping days and longer blocks of time less frequently. But this idea that the day needs to be parsed into these 45 or 50 or 50-minute blocks with a certain number of subjects is just a fundamental part of the assembly line model of education. As you say, credits being given for the time in seat rather than credit being given for the student's ability to perform a given set of tasks that required a certain amount of knowledge. Mm-hmm. When I've asked educators, what they would want to do if they could start a school from scratch, and the subject comes around to time, almost nobody says, I'd like to tweak the schedule a little bit. I need 4 or 5 more minutes a day or 10 minutes more a day to teach. Most people say, I would want to blow up the daily schedule, and that really is the case.
So Grant, why, given that it's so difficult to break out of, why is it important that schools break out of that traditional timetable?
I think what most people find is that if we want to achieve a deeper, richer learning environment, we can't be constrained by that artificial, 45 minutes from now the bell is going to ring. Mm-hmm. And most people want to go to longer blocks of time where students and teachers can collectively, collaboratively go more deeply into the work that they're doing, and whether that's around project type of work or collaborative team-based type of work or deeper investigations, it seems that those longer blocks of time that allow us to pursue things more deeply rather than more thinly is almost a universal objective amongst educators and frankly students as well.
So I think it was a week and a half ago or 2 weeks ago, you actually tweeted out a blog from one of students at a school, and I can't remember the name of the school, but in that blog she talked about, thank God it's Thursday, and Thursday was her iDiploma time, and she included a snapshot of her timetable, and every Tuesday and Thursday it was a huge chunk of time. I think it was in total around 2.5 hours on Tuesday and about an hour and a half on Thursday. And I got to thinking about that timetable. What are some examples that you have of really effective time disruptions, and how are they answering the call of this sort of approach, this deeper and richer approach to learning?
So I'll give you 3 really quick examples, and I'm not going to go into them in depth because of time here, but people can follow these up on the school websites. One would be the Design 39 campus in Poway, California. That's P-O-W-A-Y. Just Google Design 39 campus. This is a public K-8 school. They essentially have 3 blocks of time during the day. They have instruction time, passion time, and discovery time.
Oh.
And by the way, this is a Common Core school in a union teacher district. They're hitting all of their standards, achieving all of their Common Core objectives, but they're doing it with a much more, I don't want to say amorphous, but much more flexible use of time. As a gentleman who I quoted in my book from Science Leadership Academy in Philadelphia says, time becomes the variable, not the constraint. Another great example is Hobsonville Point Secondary School in Auckland, New Zealand. You can find them, or you can find Claire Amos on Twitter, and Claire has posted on her blog the entire schedule for the school. This is a public high school in New Zealand, and again, really, really thoughtful and interesting uses of time. But again, on both of these examples of these schools, they started with a pedagogy and a set of learning outcomes and objectives, and they made time fit those really rich understandings of both learning outcomes and pedagogy. This isn't just, everybody does stuff whenever they feel like it. They're very specific goals. The third one would be the Hawkins School, a private school, independent school in Cleveland, Ohio, where essentially the head of school, Scott Looney, a really visionary guy several years ago, said, look, we just cannot achieve our learning outcome goals given this daily schedule we have, this annual schedule. He asked his faculty to really deeply rethink it, and they came up with a marvelous annual schedule that allows 2 or 3 big 3-week intensives, they call them, for schools to deeply immerse in a single subject, almost like the Colorado College model, which allows them to go deeply into projects, work in the community, do internships, entrepreneurships, all that sort of things. Those are 3 that I would point out as people who've really broken it. There's a lot of schools that have gone to block scheduling and that sort of thing, which are maybe great for a particular school, but in terms of really pushing the edges of that thinking, those are some exemplars.
That's great. And also, I just throw this back up, your book here, and say that you have some great examples between, in the first sort of 30 pages around what schools are doing and what they're doing purposefully. And the Hawkins School is one that really interested me in terms of making sure that the values of the school are reflected in the timetable.
Yeah.
Those are great examples in Ed Journey, and I'm continuing to find more. People who follow my blog will see those come up fairly frequently when I find other schools that are doing that.
Yeah, Justin.
I was going to say that Hawkins School example is in the book, and I wonder if you could talk a little bit about their approach, the steps, some of the brave conversations they had to have, or approaches they had to kind of undergo, that allowed them the space and time to envision, or where do you start, I guess, is what I think some people might be asking themselves.
So where it starts is, and again, I give all this credit to Scott Looney at Hawken. In that example, he said, look, we're going to identify what we think great learning looks like. And once they did that, and they looked back at their daily and annual schedule, he literally said, we can't get there from here. So we have to change, fundamentally change our allocations of time. And he said to his faculty, 3 years from now, this was 5 years ago or 6 years ago, 3 years from now, we are going to open school with a schedule that allows us to meet our own self, the learning goals that we as a community have identified. He said, and I'll give you that time. You guys come up with it. I'm not going to tell you what it has to look like, but we're going to open school 3 years from now with that changed schedule. So if you can't get there, then I'll be figuring it out from the top down. And of course, his team did a wonderful job of looking at different alternatives and coming up with that. So it's that combination of empowering people with the authority to think broadly and expansively and really, really outside the box, but then saying, hey, we are going to do it. That's a non-negotiable.
Mm-hmm. Some of the things that we were talking about in 21 have expanded. We're looking at it. Sorry. From the perspective of what teachers were doing in their class. So while EdJourney is a great resource, take a look at Cohort 21, and then we can start to have these conversations around our broader case community. And I think because innovation can start slowly, and the Hawken School is a great example of we've got 3 years as opposed to we're going to do this right now. So we're just going to wrap up at this point. Grant, thanks so much for your insights. We will post underneath this video. We'll post a link directly to your blog and make sure that people can get those updates for examples of schools.
Yeah, and I have some notes here. I'll put the links directly in as well, and some of those Twitter handles that you called out there that I think everyone would appreciate.
Great.
Good.
Well, appreciate those who were able to watch, and we'll see you next week.
Appreciate it again, and we'll check back with the next subject next time. Thanks a lot, gentlemen.
Thanks a lot.